Inaano ko po si Landa sa kasal. Si Lorna din. At tama si Landa. Lorna is the one I know the longest because I knew her when she was about 5 or 6 years old. Her sister was my kabarkada. So I would go to Lorna's house. But anyway, as Snoopy would say, no, I'm very eager to give this presentation because a good deal of it I heard from a Jesuit priest who's the president of Gonzaga University and who is a much called upon speaker for leadership training for the top Fortune companies. And I was able to attend international leadership summit that he put together, and it was in Rome, and I was pleasantly surprised that the first portion of his presentation on leadership was about physics and how much physics supports the belief, and it gives evidence for an intelligent creator. So I said, there has to be some opportunity when I can share this with others. So this is it. But just so you know how this came about, Ali and I were actually talking because there's a young girl, you'll see her in a brief video in a while, who is fascinated with the solar system. She can name everything about the solar system. And when I heard about her fascination, I went to visit her. She's the daughter of a friend of mine, Rosanne Romero. Her name's Malaya. And I brought her my telescope. At my age, the telescope doesn't work too well anymore. So even if it, focuses on things at a distance, I can't see it that clearly. So I said, the telescope is better off with someone young. And so she has that telescope, and she looked at the moon, and even with more fascination, then she got something that I always wanted to have when I was young, which is a model of the solar system. I don't think all of you want to have those things, but Malaya got one. And I said, my gosh, I always wanted to have something like that this little girl has. And so it started, I asked, Ali, let's go visit Malaya. I want to see her model of the solar system. And we can talk about, science there. As it turned out, I was sick most of the first quarter of the year, so I never got to visit Malaya. So Ali figured, let's just have this, okay? And so we have Malaya in a video. So you'll see that in a while. So let me present this scientific case for God. And as I was saying, most of your expectations are going to be hit right on the bottom. Okay? And one of the first things I do want to do in making this presentation is to help you see how science and faith are not conflicting. Okay? Which is something that many people think, that science and faith are always opposites or opponents. But science can actually very much deepen your faith. And in fact, here you have the scientific evidence to prove the existence of God and the Creator. So let me start this by just showing you there are actually about 50 Nobel laureates and other popular scientists who believe in God. I don't know how familiar you are with all these names, but these are tough names. Okay. From the ancient times, which you would probably have known from your science studies, to the more recent ones. So, I'm sure you're all familiar with Albert Einstein, and look at what he says. The more I study science, the more I believe in God. Or another person, Louis Pasteur, who we're all familiar with, he says, science brings men nearer to God. The classic scientist, Isaac Newton, who was the chair in Cambridge, he says, don't doubt the Creator because it is inconceivable that accidents alone could be the controller of this universe. And we'll give you some facts there. Okay? And at the bottom, I don't know if you can read it well, but this is from Werner Heisenberg, who's the father of quantum physics, which is one of the later theories and models of science, he says, the first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will make you an atheist. Okay? At sometimes the first look. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. Okay, so it changes. It changes your perception. Now these are more recent scientists, and I really like what Francis Collins says. At the top left, he says, the God of the Bible is also the God of the genome. God can be found in the cathedral or in the laboratory. Okay. And on the right, you have Mr. Taylor, Joseph Hudson Taylor, who says a scientific discovery is also a religious discovery. There is no conflict between science and religion. Our knowledge of God is made larger with every discovery we make about the world. Okay? And this last gentleman, Carl Sagan's very popular. He put together that whole documentary on the cosmos, which was shown over TV, and the movie of Jodie Foster about life was, Contact, was dedicated to him. Okay? And he says, science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality. So I hope you see just from this glimpse of a few famous scientists that really science can deepen our faith and lead us closer to God. Now these are eminent scientists, but you don't need to be an eminent scientist to know that. Even from basic science, and this is where I want to bring in little Malaya, just so you can hear from her.
I don't know.
Maybe you have 100,000.
Oh my.
You have lots of bones in your body. You know, he said he wanted to touch the sun,
Okay.
and then he touched the sun. He touched the sun, and then he got black.
Oh no. How big is the sun?
This big.
And how big is the earth?
It's small.
And how tiny are we? Who made the solar system?
G-O-D.
If you make something, you must be big, right? So is God big?
Yep.
How big is God? Super big! Super big! How big is the sun? Because God is so... And
Big.
what can God do?
Big magic.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. From the mouth of babes, you get the truth. So even in her perception, she knows that God is so big and we are so tiny. Okay. And that's why scripture, and this is very much how I got into science, because I love looking at the night sky. It says, when I see the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you have made him little less than a god, crowned him with glory and honor. Okay. So just looking up at the night sky will bring you into this. And where it says here, what is man that you care for him? I wanted to show you one slide that will hopefully also put us in place. okay, in our proper place as man. This is a 1-hour clock of the existence of life on planet Earth. Okay? Our solar system, the sun, is estimated to be about 4.5 billion years old. Sometimes that's just a number. But Landa and I had a chance to travel to Lebanon, and we saw the cedars of Lebanon that are 5,000 years old. And we were just standing there and saying, they've been around a long time. You know, and compared to us, but if you look at this, okay, this is 570 million years in 1 hour, okay, in the 9-hour clock. And it shows at 9 o'clock when life more or less appeared, and as it evolved, where does man show up? The last second. How long have we been around? Pretty short. Okay, we haven't been around such a long time. The solar system, this is just our this solar system and planet Earth. We're not even talking about the universe here. But hopefully it puts us in our place a bit, because sometimes we think we know it all. And we're entitled to a lot. But what is man that you think of him? Mortal man that you care about him? We only showed up on planet Earth in the final second of that 1 hour. Okay? And that's why, when you think about how precious life is, of all the planets, notice there's no Pluto here. Because it's already been decided that Pluto is not a planet, it's a moon of the outer planets. So it's been taken off of our solar system. But if you look at this, like what Malaya was saying, you know, in the solar system, where does life exist? In just one place, so far, on planet Earth. And we've been fascinated by the whole thing of, can we find life elsewhere? And you know, if you really study, I don't have time to really get into this, but it's one of the things I love. Saturn has many moons, and there's one moon there called Titan, and it looks so much like planet Earth. And one of the things they always look for when they search for life is their water. Because if there was proof of water, then maybe life could exist. But so far, we haven't found life anywhere else but on planet Earth. And that's why one astronomer, his proof that God really exists is very simple. Okay? He says, I always look at the planets and see every movement. I realize all of them are moving. But one thing really amazes me. The Earth never changes its course. Not even a bit, even 1 degree. And you know why? If the Earth gets 1 degree closer to the sun, it will burn and no life. And if it's 1 degree further or apart, it will freeze. So no life. So this astronomer says, so I realized there's someone holding Earth in its place. And that someone is called God. Okay? And that's just like an intuitive approach to the stars. But what I'd like to present you with is the harder facts and evidence. And if you look at the letter of Paul to the Romans in chapter 1, verses 19 to 20, keep this in mind as we go through everything. Paul says, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Meaning to say, really, if you take a good, honest look at creation, you will know the Creator. Okay? And that's what scientists have discovered. Those who are honest with themselves and stick to pure science. So I mentioned to you Father Spitzer, upon which most of this is based, and he was the one who brought this really forth. He said, there is extensive evidence from physics for a beginning and the fine-tuning of the universe. And when the complementary nature of these insights is seen, it provides compelling evidence for a transcendent, intelligent creator. So he says, if anyone is a scientific atheist, that's false. You cannot be in science and be an atheist, because science proves the existence of God. So we're going to look a bit at what you wanted, the evidence and the facts in a simple way. But I just wanted to show one more chart to sort of place us again in where all of these things talk to. I don't know if Ali remembers this, or even if I showed it to her when I was teaching. She was my student in math science. But you know how they make diagrams in math or science? The horizontal down there represents size, okay? And you see it goes from atomic to galactic. The size of an atom to the size of the galaxy. So you can imagine that's very big, no? The galaxy compared to an atom. The vertical line here is speed or velocity. The ceiling is the speed of light, because nothing can go beyond the speed of light. But I put 0.7 of the speed of light. And why did I do this? For us, many of us, what we're familiar with is simply classical Newtonian mechanics. This is the world we move in. We don't live in an atomic world, nor do we live in the galactic world, nor do we travel at speeds closer to the speed of light. So this is the world we're familiar with, and Isaac Newton has basically described that. But when you get to the subatomic world, it's a different theory. Quantum theory, Werner Heisenberg, father of quantum physics. When you go into the galactic, you get into cosmology. And when you go close to the speed of light, you get into Einstein's theory of relativity. Now, why I'm just showing this to you is some of what we'll be talking about is going to come close to cosmology and relativity. You don't need necessarily to understand it, but also just so you know, these are realms that we may not always be dealing with. Okay? So it's outside our familiar. But these are the different models and theories. So when you talk about in the beginning, what happened? The first person who really made a proposition or model of what happened in the beginning in 1927 was actually a priest, Lemaitre. Okay? And he was a contemporary of Albert Einstein. And when he made his proposition of an expanding universe, what does that mean? The universe started small and was expanding. At that time, that was just theory, speculation, no evidence. So Albert Einstein actually didn't give it much credence. He said, that's not believable. Until within 2 years, there was already evidence for it. In 1929, Edwin Hubble, the famous Hubble telescope is named after him, he discovered what is called a redshift. Okay. Plain layman's language, remember if you put visible light through a prism, what do you see? A rainbow of colors, okay? Something like that. That's what you call the spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. And everything that, is light or radiation has that spectrum. And Edwin Hubble noticed that anything moving away has a red shift in the spectrum, like this. Notice how the colors move towards the red side. So that's what you call the red shift. Now if they're moving closer, they shift towards the blue, which would be a blue shift. But what was noticed when he looked at all the stars and everything, all of them exhibited a red shift. How you experience this in ordinary life? Have you ever seen ambulances with the sirens or a police car? Do you notice that the sound of the siren changes with the pitch? When they're drawing closer, it's different. When they're receding, it's different. That's like the red shift, okay? Except it's with sound. So basically, that's what he discovered. That everything, all the galaxies, all the stars, exhibited a red shift, and in that case, all of them are moving away. So that seemed to beef up Lebeter's expanding universe, because everything was moving apart. Then, this was in 1929. In 1964, Penzias and Wilson made an important discovery, which was an accident. And some of the important discoveries are accidents. They actually worked for Bell, the Bell telephone company, like PLDT in the States. And they built this sort of telescope to try and help make the communication, long-distance communication better, so you don't get this scratchy noise, you know, or background noise. And when they first put this up, they discovered that there was a background noise. So they thought maybe some of the birds pooped in the telescope and it was creating difficulties, so they had it cleaned and said, but it was still there. But the major discovery they made was the noise wasn't coming from Earth. The noise was coming from outer space. And that's what they call the cosmic background radiation. And what did that point to? Think for a while if you were barbecuing chicken or something with coal. But you fire it up, there are flames, and after that, what happens? You just have embers, the red heat. Okay? Or if you had a campfire, you have the fire, then when you want it, you know, you don't need that anymore. You just get the embers in the campfire. That is basically like the cosmic background radiation. What it was pointing to was, at some point in the beginning of the universe, there was a big explosion. Okay? And the remnant of that explosion, the embers of that explosion, is this cosmic background radiation, heat of about 2.7 Kelvin, that has been just around from the beginning of the universe. So this cosmic background radiation pointed to the actual, what you call, initial beginning of the expansion, the explosion. Okay? And later on, when you got better telescopes, and in fact, they put telescopes out into space. This is the discovery of Penzias and Wilson on their telescope. They saw the background radiation. This one, more sophisticated telescopes, also observed the same background radiation, but this time the satellites were out in space, no longer on Earth. So it definitely confirmed that it was coming from outer space. Okay? And so if you put all of this together, the whole concept of an expanding universe, the red shift, the cosmic background radiation, and the proof from satellites all the way to 2001, which is within the millennium, it really said that the theory of an expanding universe is well corroborated and very well accepted in science. So much so that this is now what you call the Big Bang theory that they use for the TV show. Okay? But what it essentially states is our universe began, like, try to think of a pin, the pin top of a needle. That's one point. Everything, all the mass, all the energy is compressed there, and then it explodes. Okay, it explodes in a big bang, and since that point, it was expanding. Okay, all the way out, forming the stars and the galaxy. That in itself is a another discussion how the stars form. One of the things you learn is all of us, and you might like this, we are all made out of stardust. Okay? Because everything, like carbon is the basis of life. Where do you get carbon? From the stars. Okay, so when you look at one another, not only are you made in the image of life, you're stardust. Okay? Kaya pala mga artistahin. Okay. So, just to try and summarize the Big Bang model. And by this time, Einstein said it was the most beautiful model of how the universe came about. Okay? It began with a Big Bang, the huge explosion, and they determined the time, working with everything that they've observed. The universe began 13.7 billion years ago. So there is a beginning point. Okay? Our solar system began 4.5 billion years. So in the expansion, our Milky Way galaxy and our solar system. This is just interesting trivia on the side, but I think it should be good for you to know because the mass and energy of the universe, only 4.6% is visible matter. Okay, that's why when you look up at the sky, it's not because the lights are out. Really, only 4.6% is visible matter that emits and absorbs electromagnetic radiation and light. And of that visible matter, 10, you'll see a lot of numbers, okay, in physics. When you say 10 to the 53, that means 10 and add 53 zeros after. Try and think of buying 1 kilo of milk or meat, but now put 10 and 53 zeros kilos of visible matter. Okay. And mainly, where is that found? In 10 to the 22 stars, in 10 to the 11 galaxies. I mean, that's out there. Okay. So, story in itself. But again, what does that all have to do? What is the significance of a beginning? By the way, if you only have 4.6 visible, the other is what they call dark matter or dark energy. So that's about 95 point some percent. Dark matter, dark energy. So what is the significance of a beginning? First, the beginning equals the point at which the universe came into existence. Okay? That Big Bang. Prior to that point, the universe did not exist. Agree? Okay. So, prior to that point, prior to the Big Bang, the universe was nothing. There was nothing. From nothing, only nothing comes. Agree? Like if you had a room totally isolated, nothing was inside, and you keep staring at that room, would anything happen if it did not interact with anything else? It would just be nothing. So from nothing comes nothing. Therefore, something other than the universe caused the universe to exist. For the universe to come about, it must have been something outside of the universe. Because the universe, being nothing, could do nothing. And this something must be beyond the universe. Something transcendent, outside of the universe, beyond it. Okay? And that transcendent cause of the universe is called the Creator or God. Okay. So from the Big Bang Theory alone, it points already to the existence that God created the universe. The universe couldn't come to be on its own. Okay. Now that's just from the Big Bang model. Okay. If you have questions, sulat nyo lang. We'll get to that later. But there is scientific evidence for this. I mean, there was already scientific evidence for the Big Bang Theory, but even to make it more hard evidence, that you would accept, that you could say, in the beginning, there was God. Okay. And this transcendent creator was the one who brought about the universe. There are actually 3 sets of evidence for a creator. Now here you're going to get into some scientific terms a bit. I'll try and keep it simple. Okay? Especially entropy. You love entropy because we always deal with it. Okay? So let's take a look at entropy. When you crack open an egg, when you're frying an egg in a pan, what do you notice about the egg? Crack it open and then the egg spreads out. Does the egg ever go the opposite direction and come together? Doesn't. It always spreads out. Or cup of, really hot beverage, sizzling hot. What do you notice about it as time goes by? Does it remain sizzling hot? No. It cools off, usually until the temperature of the beverage is the same as the external temperature. So you notice nature is going a certain way. Okay? Or the guys here, if you play pool and you hit, the balls, what happens to them? They scatter. Does it ever happen that the balls come together in that order? No. All of those explain the law of entropy, or are actually examples of the law of entropy being displayed. What is entropy? It's a scientific term. Okay, but what it really means is it measures the degree of disorder or disorganization in a system. Okay? And the law of entropy says entropy always increases, or nature always moves towards disorder or disorganization. Okay? Like when you always have to comb your hair, you can say entropy. Because if that law didn't exist, why my hair would stay as if I went to the salon? Or I like thinking of it in the room. Every now and then, you fix the room. Some people do it several times a day, some others daily, others less frequently. But when I say, I just fixed the room and now it's a mess, that's entropy in action. Okay? So when you go to it in terms of science, that law of entropy is actually the second law of thermodynamics. I don't know if you hit this, engineering, medical students definitely would. Ali in that side would just have breezed through. So this is also the first law of thermodynamics, is the law of conservation of energy. That you know. The second one is harder, entropy. It says entropy always increases. So what does that mean? When entropy always increases, it means a system tends to run down, or like the hot beverage tends to cool off. Or if you open a perfume bottle, it tends to scatter and dispense. It doesn't happen that the perfume fragrance will go into the bottle. Okay, it's always outward, wear out. And it essentially says there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. That's why we always need to buy gas, always need to pay for electricity, because we need to put something in order to get, a machine working. Wouldn't we love it if there was a perpetual motion machine? But the laws of nature do not allow. So that's the law of entropy. So it says, in connection with the universe, if the universe did not have a beginning, then it must have been around for an infinite time, like a perpetual motion machine. Can you follow? Accept? If it did not have a beginning, it was there, infinity. But that's impossible. because you can't have a perpetual motion machine. And the fact that stars are still forming today tells us that the universe has not run down. And that puts a limit on how long it has been around. You know, I can tell you where the stars are being formed. We call it the nursery ground of stars. And you can actually see that with a telescope. It's fascinating. Stars are still being born today. So stardust is still going on. Okay? And because this is the case, then we know that, you know, there's just been a finite past for our universe, okay, based on the law of entropy. So apart from this, there are a few evidences in support to the law of entropy. I mean, if you want facts apart just from logical reasoning. This is a bit, I won't get into this, I'll mention it so that you know it, but don't need to understand it fully. The ratio of CMB is the cosmic background radiation, okay, to starlight. What does that merely say? If the universe had no beginning, okay, the ratio should be infinity to 1. Okay? There's a lot of that out there, if it was long ago. But the actual data, observation, scientific method is the ratio is only 100 to 1. Meaning to say, the universe didn't exactly begin that long ago. That's why they have it at 13.7 billion years. And they could actually measure and put a number to it. This is a bit more harder. But just to say there are physical evidences. Because people sort of, you know, scientists like always thinking of theories and more theories. So they said, okay, maybe the Big Bang expanding, but could it have also been that it expanded and contracted and expanded and contracted? So that's what they call the bouncing universe. Okay? And this man, Tolman, just said, even if you have a bouncing universe, the evidence and data is such that even with the bouncing, kasi the radiation, when it explodes, then it contracts, and another explosion, so your radiation should always be increasing. But looking at the cycle and the evidence, even when you have a bouncing universe, there must be a beginning. Okay, so even no matter what kind of thing the scientists are trying to think of, they couldn't explain away a beginning. And the last thing, entropy at the Big Bang is quite low. What does that mean? Remember, entropy moving towards disorder. So actually the entropy, law of entropy says entropy always increases. So at the beginning it was quite low, and in fact it was quite low. But if you do the statistical calculation on having a low entropy at the beginning, it's actually exceedingly improbable. They did the math, and the impossibility of this was, and a very famous scientist computed this, Roger Penrose, it was calculated that to have a low entropy is, can you see it? It's not just 10 to the 10, but 10 to the 10 to the 123. So just try 10 to the 123 is 10 with 123 zeros. And then you raise this other 10 to the 10 to the 123. In fact, I say this number, if you use the 10-point font size, cannot fit in our solar system. That's how big the number is. But what is more interesting is, statistically, 10 to the 10 to the 123 is so exceedingly improbable that it's like a monkey typing the whole works of Shakespeare perfectly in 2 weeks by randomly tapping the keys. Gets ya?
That's nice.
So it's so improbable that for it to happen, it must have been part of an intelligent design. Okay, it cannot be. Remember, this is all science. So you do have scientific facts. You'll get the handout, which will give it to you if you don't remember. Okay? So So that's the law of entropy. Not too difficult, no? Okay. I get it. You get it? Yes. We'll have a test later. Okay. The second set of evidences is from what they call space-time geometry. Basically, you're familiar with length, width, height, right? X, Y, Z usually on the no. But then also exist in time. So it's length, width, height, and time. That's just space-time. And they have the whole geometry of it. Try make it simple. How many of you have heard of Stephen Hawking? Okay, if you watch the movie, The Theory of Everything, he's the eminent. He has the Newtonian chair at Cambridge. He occupies that. Okay, so Stephen Hawking, together with Roger Penrose in 1980, so not too long ago, okay, came up with what you call the singularity theorem. These are now scientific words for what we can just call a beginning. Okay, but basically they said, and that's all in their book, it's impossible to extend space-time beyond the singularity, which essentially means there must be a beginning. Okay? The singularity, the Big Bang is what is called the singularity. That exact point, okay, where something begins. And they actually work through the paths through space and time, tracing it back, and eventually it hits a limit, or what you call the edge, okay, or the beginning of time. So just based on what they said, there has to be a beginning. They call it the singularity. Another person, 1993, more recent. Remember I was saying, this is the best time to be around for science to prove faith. Okay, 1993, Borden, Vilenkin said, even if you think of all the bouncing universe or whatever inflationary models, all of them have a singularity. Meaning again, all of them have a beginning. 1999, Alan Guth, in his book, The Inflationary Universe. Inflationary is simply expanding. Okay? He said, as hard as physicists have worked to construct an alternative, so far all the models that we construct have a beginning. So they looked at everything people were working on, everything has a beginning or a singularity. And this one only recently, the Borde-Vilenkin-Guth theorem, the three of them got together to make one hard and fast theorem that everyone accepts now. It says all expanding universes, multiverses, even bouncing universes have a beginning. I don't know, I was struck by how Chu decorated the place. She didn't know I was going to have a rocket ship also. But just to try and explain this very briefly, hopefully in a way you might understand. Let's say this rocket ship was taking off from our galaxy. We'll be very simplistic, okay? At the speed of 100,000 kilometers per second. Okay? Yeah, that's fast. Rocket ship. We're close to speed of relativity, but not there. Okay? And it's heading towards another galaxy, which is moving at 20,000 kilometers per second. Okay? So the rocket ship's moving at 100, the galaxy it's heading towards is moving at 20. When it gets there, based on the galaxy that it's come to, okay, when it's there, its actual speed observed by the galaxy that's moving at 20 is going to be 80. Agree kayo?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's close to relativity. Huh? You're already thinking relativity. Now, if you keep moving, and he keeps moving towards galaxies, moving at other speeds, his speed is going to get close to zero, ultimately. Or if he moves backward, his speed is going to get bigger and bigger, but he cannot escape the speed of light. That's your limit. So, Borde, Vilenkin, and Guth, based on stuff like this, just based on space and time really have said all universes must have a beginning. You can't just go infinity here or infinity there. There are finite limits to our universe. Okay? So that's space-time. The last one, anthropic coincidences. What does theology mean? Anyone? Theology? Okay, the study of God. Okay. Some even say love of God. Theo, logos. Okay. Anthropology, for some who take it in university. Anthrop,
Human.
man. So when you say anthropic coincidences, these are seemingly coincidences that allow for life, intelligent life as we know it. And can you say they're coincidences? We already met one of these. Okay, remember the monkey? Low entropy universe is necessary for the development and complexification of life force. The odds against this were 10 to the 10 to the 123. So to have this be there for life to exist as we know it was almost an impossibility. It must have been purposefully done by an intelligent creator. Okay. So to give you a break from me, I want to show you a video. There's a brief 7-minute video on these anthropic coincidences, and then we'll come back in a while, okay? So, Jola will go.
And a possibility. What's the likelihood that everything that happened was by accident? How likely is it that the creation of the universe was simply a random event?
Contemporary science, cosmology, physics, and other mathematical sciences show that the universe is mathematical. He is made out of mathematics from the very beginning to its top. Mathematics is a peak of rationality.
Consider this. If one of the gravitational constants of this universe were off by just one part in 10 to the 120th power, which is a fantastically small number. If the gravitational constants were off by that much, as the Big Bang progressed and gravity came into play, matter as we know it would either be constantly blowing apart or collapsing in on itself.
Random means there's just kind of no meaning and it just happens, something just happens kind of by accident, or just there's no pattern to it.
Random means that there's no way to know what's coming up.
And then there's something called Penrose's number. It expresses how finely tuned the Big Bang had to be for life to be possible. For the universe to be able to develop complicated things like life, it had to start with extremely low entropy. Roger Penrose, a famous English mathematical physicist and a close friend of Stephen Hawking, calculated how low the entropy was at the time of the Big Bang. He found that the likelihood of the entropy being so low by pure chance was 1 in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd power. That number contains more zeros than would fit in our solar system if they were printed in 10-point type.
Very often, mathematics is very demanding. I must know something which I do not know at that moment. And when I hit into such a difficult problem, then I feel that I am not prepared to deal with it.
While numbers may not lie, it is hard to comprehend such large, astronomical odds against random occurrence. Let's bring this conversation of random existence, not just closer to home, but under your skin.
So there's no carbon in the universe. There's only one place in the whole universe where carbon is made. It is made in the interior nuclear furnaces of the stars. Every atom of carbon in our bodies was once inside a star, where people of stardust made of the ashes of dead stars. And it's a very beautiful and very delicate process and very finely balanced. You've got helium, and if you could make 3 helium nuclei stick together, that would give you carbon. Now, it's impossible with things like nuclei to stick 3 together at one time. So, okay, you say, we'll do it bit by bit. Stick 2 together, that will make beryllium. Hope it stays around for a bit. Another helium comes along, attaches itself, bingo, we've got carbon. But the trouble is, beryllium doesn't stay around very long. It just disappears like that. Therefore, you have to be very, very quick indeed, in catching that extra helium nucleus.
If that energy level had been only a few percent different, it simply wouldn't have worked. The beryllium would have fallen apart too quickly. If it had been set the other direction, a little bit higher, then all of the carbon would have been able to receive easily another of these helium nuclei and become oxygen. Either way, we simply wouldn't have enough carbon to have the carbon chemistry for our bodies.
Carbon forms the building blocks of our existence. Could it have been a random event that carbon is an essential element of the universe? And then there's another foundation to life: water.
There are only two substances known to chemistry at all. Only two substances which get bigger when they freeze. Everything else shrinks. One of them is tight metal. And there's only one other substance in the entire world. And guess what it is? Water. And if water didn't expand when it froze, the oceans would be frozen on the bottom. There would be no possibility of anything happening, even if you had all these wonderful chemicals of space which were created in stardust, dark parts of the galaxy. And those things, which presumably these complicated molecules are drained onto Earth, fell into the ocean, started this thing which we ultimately call living beings. Would never have happened because you wouldn't have had any place for it to go. The oceans would be frozen, except a little bit on the top.
So even if there is an argument to be made that this is all random, do either the math or any of the theories support that conclusion?
What seems like a very fortuitous coincidence, these fundamental forces and constants that govern our universe seem to be just right for what we need to have life to develop and to be sustained stably. Either our universe is very unusual to have these particular fundamental forces and constants, or else we're just a random accident in a large number of universes. A lot of times the multiverse theory is brought up to kind of explain away the sense that we have that the universe seems just very comfortable for us to exist.
The numbers for this to be a random chance, and one can look at how many things have to stand. It's like saying got a hurricane, and at the end of the hurricane, somewhere, you find a needle or a pin